picture of it. I don't know if it'll show up in the picture, but the pipe itself is in such bad shape. It's black and white. Can't see it. Here's a break. I have color pictures for this one. These are black and white. You can see roots actually growing into the pipe. That's a 2-inch steel pipe about a foot down in those alleys. And I had photographed it purposely to show that we need to make these repairs. And here's the date that I actually took that picture. And there's the break. And in these alleys, right up here, you can see they just dump dog feces. So the wipe goes up here. And in the summertime when it rains, and this is what I told the Secretary of Labor when I filed my first complaint with the Secretary of Labor in March 2007, that they were telling me not to worry about these issues when I could clearly see a hazard to the community. So I took a photograph of it and I kept it. So what we have here is a safety hazard that affects not only that part of the county, but because it's a line in the public water supply, it could contaminate the entire sector of that water supply. So it's not just an alley a few people were worried about. Bacteria, Cryptosporidium, Giardia, and other things can spread throughout the system. Salmonella. It's well known throughout the country in water circles, and I'm a water operator, a state licensed water operator, that those contaminants spread in the system. That's why it must be controlled immediately. But because the city wasn't actually doing testing out there, and according to the testing, when I did my audit, I discovered that the 50 sites the city tests are nowhere near where the contaminants could be. And it's my understanding that they do that for a reason. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but this would make sense the way their management style is, that they didn't test areas that they actually might find contaminants. It's like not enforcing the law. If you want to make your community look good, you just don't enforce the law and you have no law violations. Well, that's the theory here. If they don't test, they're not going to find anything. If they're not going to find anything, then there's no problem. That's false safety, and that's a violation of Federal Clean Water Act, because once we know, and I knew, and the staff knew about this issue, and we couldn't bring it up. Well, I was naive. The city called me into the office that week, and they knew that there was something going on. They could sense that there was some turmoil amongst the staff. Well, that same week, December 14th, around there, 2007, we got a service call. This is the most important thing I came across in my entire career public service, is they got a call, and I was at the office at the time, got a call that there was a water leak downtown behind the county jail, between the county jail and the county courthouse in downtown Kingman by the 4th Street area. Well, we dispatched a crew thinking it was a water leak. A 6-man crew, which is 2 trucks, was dispatched. They got a big water leak. It must be because it cracked the main street in the middle of the street. I didn't think anything of it. I was still at the desk, and I was concerned about the other issues that I found, the county and other issues that I was still kind of wondering how to handle. So I'm stuck at the office. The crews get out there. By the end of the day, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a crew showed up at my desk, and one of the crew members said, "Dean, you gotta do something." I said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, that wasn't water leaking on the street. That was raw sewage." And we didn't know it at first. They said because the jail inmates had rioted at the jail, and this had happened before. Evidently, 3 weeks before, I was told by the wastewater superintendent Jeff Corwin, and validated at the federal hearing on March 31st, 2010, that they knew about this problem ahead of time, and it was something they were looking at, but they weren't addressing in a timely manner because it was costly, and no one wanted to spend the money to fix this plugging leak that the jail mates could do. What happened was the jail mates rioted. They plugged the sewer lines with lemons, which clogged the entire city line up in that part of the city. Well, that caused a backlog. Well, what no one was known at the time was the city Public Works Director, Mr. Jack Kramer, was in charge of making sure all those streets were back there were paved near the jail because all the heavy traffic because of the new jail was built back there. Well, they paved 3 inches of new asphalt, but they didn't go in there and clean out the asphalt around the manholes, the sewer manholes. So they left 3 inches of asphalt on top of sewer manholes. So our 6 workers going up there didn't know that was a sewage because there was no manholes. They were all covered. This is negligence on the part of the Public Works Director and the Streets Department. Why they didn't go back, that's pretty common. They just didn't follow up on the contract. So the water leaks out. Our crews get up there, make the repair. The water forces the manhole to blow up, blow off, water gets on the crew. I have photographs showing the guys with wet pants. Well, they came back. They were a little bit upset that they got in water. They had to be taken to the doctor. Under the general standard operating procedures is that once you get raw sewage on you, you have to be given shots. Well, these 6 workers were given shots for 3 months. The worst thing that happened, if you think about something that's bad, it seems to get worse. Well, imagine the worst part of the community getting involved in this. Well, Palo Christi School is only a half a block from the county jail. Why they built the county jail near a school is beyond me and beyond any reasonable person. But for some reason, for whatever reasons, internal whatever, they built this jail right next to the school. That's why we don't build jails next to schools. Well, these kids, 400 of them, or 350 it was estimated, were on a walking field trip from the Palo Christi School, elementary school, down that same street where the break was, down all the way down to what we call the Powerhouse, a local museum. Well, they have to follow the natural course of the road. They followed the same path. It's that estimated thousands of gallons. I estimated originally 10,000 gallons of raw sewage was dumped into the public street. Well, that raw sewage went down the street, crossed a couple of streets, and went all the way down into a ravine that it's a tributary, according to the state of Arizona, of the Colorado River. It may take a year or two for that water finally to reach the Colorado River, but it still feeds in the Colorado River, so that would make it technically a waterway of the United States, which is a federal issue. So, the problem was, this crew told me that the kids got into it. He came down my desk, told me the kids got into it. They were all upset because they got into it. Now I went to I didn't know what to do at first because I knew what would happen. If I took this information to the Public Works Director, Jack Kramer, hell would be to pay because he directly was responsible for this whole incident. Because if they had done their job originally, none of this would have happened. So I went to his office, which is attached to my office. It's in the Public Works building out off Route 66. I walked 40 feet to his office, told him, Mr. Kramer, we have an issue. He said, what is it? And I told him kids got into that wastewater as well. He says, I didn't hear that. I said, yeah, that's why I'm telling you that. He didn't seem he didn't want to hear that information. That's not good information to hear, because that means you have to notify parents. Well, I knew that was going to be entanglement, but I didn't think it would be insurmountable, because if the kids only got splashed in it lightly, they'd probably be no hazard, but you still have to look into it. They may have gotten wet clothes and had those clothes on them all day. Well, he was visibly upset, understandably, and then he ordered me back to my desk, and he said he would bring it up to the staff meeting in the morning. Well, he had the staff, it's a Monday morning, he had a staff meeting. I went back to my desk. About 30 to 40 minutes later, Mr. Jeff Corwin, the wastewater superintendent, came to my desk, and he said, Jack would like us to go to the school and tell the principal. And I looked at Mr. Kramer oddly, and I said, why am I involved in this? I'm the water conservationist staff photographer. He says, well, you're the one that knows about it. I said, okay, why doesn't the water superintendent do it? Well, he just wants us to do it. So Jeff and I both went to the school. We had a meeting with the principal at the time. I forgot his name right now, but he's no longer at the school. He's been laid off. He's one of the only principals laid off in the last couple of years, and I think I know why he got laid off, because of that incident. But that's only my suspicion. It may not be true. The issue was the principal was already aware of the kids getting that water, because he told us. He says, well, I heard there was an issue, and Jeff was sitting there next to me. We're both sitting at his desk, and I wanted Jeff to talk because this is his specialty. He's the wastewater specialist. I'm just a water guy. But I did all the talking, and the principal seemed concerned, genuinely concerned. He said, oh, okay, well, we'll look into it. And I said, well, you have to contact the parents, because these kids might get sick, because there's hepatitis. All sorts of issues might come up with sewage from a jail. Inmates have a lot of problems, and they have a lot of diseases and things because they're drugs or whatever. So that's really the worst sewage you can have. That's what really concerned me and Jeff. Well, I wrote down a copy of the report. We talked to him for approximately 30 minutes, and then we left his office. I felt good. I thought, sure, okay, great. Everything we handled. This incident is complete. It's done. I've done my duty. Well, the next morning, about 7 o'clock in the morning, when I came into the office, I was called into the office to the superintendent, George Sedage's office. Mr. Sedage was visibly upset, and he said, he warned me, and I said, I didn't know. I just showed up at the office, so I have no idea what he's talking about. And he said, sit down. So he sat down. He shut the door in his office. He says, I've warned you, Dean. I've warned you. And I'm thinking, well, what is he referring to? And he says, well, you know, you're out of control here. You have to get in line. And I said, and I quickly snapped to my attention. I finally figured out what he was talking about. I said, Mr. Sewage, are you referring to the incident that happened yesterday? Are you saying that? Are you, what are you saying? And he handed me a piece of paper, and it was a warning letter. Well, that warning letter, and there was another supervisor called in, Mr. Bob Steele. He was the operations supervisor for the water. They weren't technically Bob was not my supervisor. I was underneath George and Jack Kramer in the organizational chart. Well, they had Mr. Steele there as a witness, that they were reprimanding me. Of course, they wouldn't tell me why. That's what I couldn't figure out. I said, I was a former manager of a big company, and I understand procedures of reprimand and write-ups and things. So what did I do wrong to warrant this warning letter? Because the warning letter just said on several lines, it said, one of the lines, I think line number 4, it said, you shall not discuss the city's programs in a negative manner. Translation, keep your mouth shut. I quickly saw that, and I was offended by it, and what it clearly was a letter of intimidation. So I thought, well, for sure they would want to, clarify their position, because I'm asking them, why are you giving me this letter? So I said, what did I do wrong? What rule, what law? Well, they said, you know. That's all they said, you know. Well, I don't know. I didn't know. And it wasn't until March 31st, 2010 that we actually found out why they wrote that letter. Now, I had tried from December of 07, December 18th, I think is when they gave me that letter, December 16th, somewhere around there, until March 2010, they wouldn't reveal why they wrote me that letter. I asked the city attorney, I asked the public works director, I asked a group of individuals. No one would refer why they wrote me up. It was, in fact, an intimidation letter. They were, in fact, telling a public servant, me, and actually an assistant manager to the whole department, to keep my mouth shut, or else. That's what they were doing. That's intimidation. You can't intimidate a public servant like that, because it's danger to the public. Well, I had filed, after they gave me that letter, I immediately filed my complaint with the city attorney. He told me to come down and have a meeting. Christmas was about this time. He had some meetings, so we couldn't meet till Christmas. We met at Christmas, around Christmas time. In fact, Christmas Eve, I'll never forget this as long as I live. Christmas Eve, I was called in the Human Resources office, Director Jackie Walker's office. I couldn't figure out, why are we having a meeting on Christmas Eve? Why are they calling me down there? I figured they want to resolve this issue. They were going to end it before Christmas to have a nice holiday. Just the opposite occurred. I went down to the City Hall with the water supervisor, the water superintendent, George Sewage. We sat at Jackie Walker's desk, in front of her desk, and she proceeded to point at me, which was very odd, because normally directors and managers are trained never to point. But she pointed at me, and she said flat out, I've insulted her department. I knew she was mad, because, her face was turned color, so I knew she was upset. So then I said, well, what is it, upsets you? And she basically said, you have to follow orders. You're not following your commands, your chain of command. You're not doing what we're telling you to do. And I said, well, if you're telling me I have to follow that warning letter, I don't even know what it is about. And you can't just write someone out without a reason. There has to be a reason for writing someone out. Well, they didn't go for that very well. This was more like do it or else. Either do it our way or the highway. Well, I'm thinking, I'm a public servant. I work for the people over the management. But the management's philosophy in this small town, and many others, not just this one, is that they want total and absolute control. And one of the reasons they need that control is because if they do anything wrong, it doesn't get exposed to the city council, and they keep their jobs. Whereas the lower managers, well, they'll just get axed out. So it's a self-serving management style, and it's against public policy. And that would create an incident with newspapers report it, and it get attention to the groundwater pollution that the local residents felt that was caused by the city's old-style treatment process. Well, that was an issue for years. But the police report, when I got a copy of the police report, it showed clearly that they weren't describing the facility as a government facility. They were kind of, the police report was kind of vague on what it was. And it was pretty clear to me and other staff members that there was a cover-up of the issue. Now,